Greetings, everyone. I'm Jonathan,
I am Nick.
and we are the Gosslings. And if you are ready, then we are ready. We will go ahead and kick it off with the toast.
Let's do it.
Grab your favorite drinking vessel and join us. You want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
Yeah? All right. Take up the broken sword of your father.
And strike down the darkness.
Amen.
Cheers.
Yes. Well, we got a great show for you guys today. We're really looking forward to it. But before we jump into the interview, let's get through our prerequisites.
Yeah, glad everyone's watching tonight. If you haven't yet already, we'd love your support. Take up the broken sword of your finger. Strike down the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously.
Yes.
And give this video a like as well. Share it with your friends.
Mhm.
And I think I'll leave it at that. I appreciate you doing that. I'd
Yes.
strongly suggest you do it. It is appreciated.
Helps us out greatly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our sponsors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tell us about what we got up here.
These are fantastic. This is a Kothon Spartan mug,
Yes.
handcrafted by Joel Cherico from ChericoPottery.com.
Mhm.
He is a master potter,
Yes.
and he handcrafts each and every one of these, hand paints each and every one of these. They are amazing. They're beautiful, high quality. I haven't broken one yet. I'm really proud of myself.
Attempts.
Yeah, and but they're great, and they're designed to be what we're assuming is the closest replica, if you will,
Mhm.
to what the Spartans actually carried, the
Yeah.
Kothon, which is mentioned in the historical record.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to other than what's in the historical record written down. We don't have any pictures. There's there were no paintings, drawings, anything like that.
Mhm.
So he made these by collaborating with Stephen Pressfield.
The great Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah, who is somewhat of a subject matter expert on the Spartans.
Absolutely.
And this was what they came up with.
Yeah.
Check it out at ChericoPottery.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you would also like to look as cool as you feel with your Kothon Spartan mug, then you can't go wrong with Giordani Jovanovic hair care products, made by real men for real men, or as I like to say, be as sexy as you are deadly. Give 007 a run for his money.
That's right.
What was the one that you came up with?
Oh, give your better half a reason to doubt that.
That's right. Awaken your inner John Wick.
That's right.
With Giordani Jovanovic hair and skincare products for men. Everything from beard balm to shampoos, lotions, body soaps, everything you could want, even hair growth serum.
Yeah.
It's all there. And Mike Fisher is the owner and proprietor of Giordani Jovanovic hair and skincare products. Yeah. And he's a great guy. He's a big supporter of the show. He's a really good friend. We love Mike. And small family owned Christian company.
Yeah.
They do everything themselves. It's really impressive.
Yeah.
JordaniJovanovic.com is the place to go. Check them out.
Check them out.
Get some stuff squared away for you or for the man in your life.
That's right.
Yeah.
Love it. Very good. We appreciate Mike's support of the channel.
Yeah.
And everyone watching tonight, thank you guys. We're really glad that you're here, and we think you are absolutely going to love tonight's guest.
Mm-hmm.
We've got it all teed up, and without further ado, let's get into it.
Kick it off, baby.
Let's do it. Let's roll.
Your YouTube feed is crap. Stop wasting your time watching bot-boosted shills and self-appointed gurus cloying for your attention. Instead, join the Gosslings interview live stream and podcast. The Gosslings, a dark-lit digital speakeasy of free thinkers. A super chat of radical truth-seeking wizards who eat trolls for second breakfast. Topics that'll make your mama's hair stand on end. Ideas that'll make your pastor's knees knock. Guests that will illuminate the hidden chambers of your mind. And interviews that strike down the darkness. Welcome to the Gosslings.
Brian Godawa, it is great to have you on. We are big fans of your contributions to the conversation of writing and Christianity, and we kind of wanted to talk to you about those things today because even though Nick and I are a couple of novelists as well, just like you, we have never really had a conversation about things like horror and AI and existing in Hollywood and all those things that are relevant to other Christian authors in the space of the Gosslings. And you're a writer, you've done a ton of stuff, so we're really, really honored to have you on. But before we do, I just wanted to ask, how you been, man? What's going on in your life? How you doing?
Well, I've been very, very busy.
Good.
Yeah, I've been working on a movie, writing a script about Jesus. And but what's really interesting is that I can't talk about the details right now, but I was able to incorporate. First of all, it's like I told these guys, don't just do another movie where you've got scenes out of the Gospels of the life of Jesus and the ministry and the death and it's like it's been done a million times. And you've got The Chosen out there now, which is like is ramped it up in terms of the drama, the human drama.
Yeah. And
I'm like, you got to come up with something new, something fresh. And so my take was to bring a little bit of my spiritual dynamism from my novels into it. Not a lot, but a little bit. And also to tell a story from a unique viewpoint that hasn't really been told before. And that's all I can talk about. So I'm very excited about that. Finish that up. But lately I've been working on casting my characters for all my novels of my series.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was, I had this fan of mine, Cam Harless, who contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm playing around with the AI app, Midjourney." And he's like, I already knew about this because I was playing around with myself too. But he's like, working on making some characters for your novel. I'm like, excuse me, that's my intellectual property. But I was looking at the pictures like, these are really cool. And I thought, man, if we could do all the novels like this. But it's like, it's all, even though it's relatively easy and relatively quick, that's relative speaking, you can't always get exactly what you want. So it can take time to get what you want using AI, but what you get can be so amazingly creative and interesting looking. And it just rang with my visual creative instincts that I haven't had much of opportunity to use those in many years. I do with my book covers and stuff like that, but I'm just saying to really do some artwork, but I didn't have the time to do the artwork. So I hired Cam to do it for all my novels.
Cool.
And we've been working on that for the last 5 weeks, and I'm getting two picture books out for all the characters together for those who are fans, and they're already up on the website. You can see them all for free anyway on my website at Godawa.com. Just find the Chronicles of the Nephilim or Watchers or Apocalypse, and then find your novel and click on the cast of characters. And I have all the characters there, but I thought, what about people who would want them like in their ebook or want a cool picture book, So I've been working like mad putting it together. It is so phenomenal. I just finished it last night or a couple nights ago, and it's really cool. So it'll be coming out. If you sign up at Godawa.com for my email, you'll get the notice. But the picture book, first one's coming out, within a week or so. And I'm very excited about that because I felt like it breathed new life into my whole series. So that's what I've been working on lately, and it really took me away. It was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be, but I'm very happy with it. Okay. And I think people will really love it too. In the meantime, I'm on the verge of releasing my next novel, which is called Cruel Logic. And that's a story about a serial killer in a woke university. And it's a very different from all my Bible novels. This is a contemporary thriller.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah. And it's part of another set of novels, series of novels I'll be writing called theological thriller novels. That's the name of the series.
Cool.
Where awesome. I just explore, I like to explore concepts like, original sin and all this kind of stuff. Morality.
And you do it through fiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Through a story, that's relevant and entertaining as well. So, So that's kind of what I've been working on lately. A lot of stuff.
Tell us about those 3 novels. It's a series, right? The Chronicles series, is that right?
Yeah. So I have three series: Chronicles of the Nephilim, Chronicles of the Watchers, and Chronicles of the Apocalypse. And what they are is, it started about 11, 12 years ago when I was screenwriter in Hollywood, and I thought, what could I do that's something uniquely me? And I thought of a Bible story I could write. as a movie that Hollywood would like, because it would be the ancient world and have all these wild things in it, like giants and stuff.
Yep.
And yet Christians would love it because I was just exploring this whole weird phenomenon of Genesis 6 and in the book of Genesis, and the Nephilim giants and all that. And I discovered Michael Heiser's writing, and this was long before he became famous. In fact, his book Unseen Realm was free on the internet. As he was working on it, it was called The Myth That Is True, right? So I found it in that infancy form, and it blew my mind theologically. And it sort of, I thought like, oh, maybe I could tell a few of these stories from the Bible. And now I'm up to like 16 novels based on the paradigm from Michael Heiser, which is the divine counsel motif, the Watcher's paradigm, this notion that there's a spiritual bureaucracy in a sense in heaven, in the Bible, very clearly in the Bible, and there's a hierarchy of beings, that the sons of God, and it's tied into this bizarre passage of Genesis 6 where the sons of God come to earth and mate with the daughters of men. What is that? That's weird. That sounds like Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually Greek mythology drew from the ancient Near East. So the ancient Near East was first, but nonetheless, that's a story that I think is rooted in the truth. And that's why all the other religions talk about the same concept, right? And they birthed giants, and it's this weird stuff. But when I read Heiser, he put it within the context of a theology that made sense from Genesis to Revelation, that opened my eyes to a new way of seeing the text. This isn't Gnostic. It's not like something secret that only the initiated can know or see. It's actually there in the text, but we have been so conditioned Gnostically to think as modernists when we're reading the Bible, and we read and interpret English phrases and translations that are rooted in ancient Near Eastern idioms and context, and we interpret them in our own context. So we read things like prophecies and, stars falling from the sky. Well, it has to be literally stars falling from the sky. It has to literally be the sky rolling up like a scroll, because we're modern we're in post-enlightened modernists, even Christians, who are affected by this scientism, and we don't even know it because we think we're against it, but we're not. And so we're reading this stuff hyper literalistically, and we don't even. But if you go back in the Old Testament and you study all this prophetic symbolism, you see that all this stuff, stars from the sky rolling up like a scroll, locusts, that look demonic, and all this stuff, all that stuff is rooted in Old Testament precedent. And you find that it's explained much better or much more clear of incidents that already occurred in the past, which clearly indicates that prophecy uses symbolic language and poetry, so to speak, or figurative language, symbolic mostly, to indicate things that were happening in time, in history, in their time period, right?
Yeah.
So this is just one little component of that worldview. And so it's seeking to understand the Bible in its original ancient Near Eastern context and Hebrew context, rather than our own modern way. And when you do that, you see a lot of things that are there, but we're blinded to them because of our modern predisposition. So that whole, now I had already been doing that to a certain degree, which is a whole nother story that gets into eschatology, but nonetheless, a whole nother storyline opened up to me. And I'm like, I got to retell these Bible stories through this paradigm of understanding, because it kind of, Michael Heiser was always fond of saying, if it's important, he just died, within the last few months.
Right.
Sad. But he would say that if it's weird in the Bible, it's probably important. And that's what I found to be true. And what was so cool about his work is it explained all the weird passages that you read. And as a Bible believing Christian, I believe the Bible is the word of God, but I don't believe that I necessarily understand everything. And if I don't, I continue on it, or I try to understand it. If it doesn't make sense still, I just continue on, maybe I'll find out someday later, whatever,
Yeah.
But all those weird passages, he brought explanations to them, and it wasn't just like, oh, that explains this, that explains that. It was like, they're there and they're all connected, and it's all connected to this theme. So that was the big paradigm that changed my understanding of the Bible. And I had to retell these Bible stories. So I was working on the Noah story, what it was, Noah Primeval. And I wrote the script and I tried to get interest in it. And then I found Darren Aronofsky was making his abysmally horrendous Noah movie, what turned out to be abysmal.
Oh, is that the one with Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My doppelganger.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I was
sure.
worried that oh no, is he going to have the stuff I found? So I'm
Tell
like,
me
well, what
about
can
it.
I do to get my story out? And that was at the point in my career when I realized, well, it's time for me to write novels. I haven't written a novel yet, and why don't I novelize it? And then I know I can get it out. And self-publishing was just really getting hot. So I couldn't get a Christian publisher because there's too much sex and violence, too much weirdness, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't get an agent for the same reason. So I just self-published,
Nice.
and it just took off.
Yeah.
And this is right when Kindle was becoming hot. And so I realized, there's more stories to tell. And I could make a good living, or I didn't know at the time, but I thought, I can maybe make some money at the time. And being a screenwriter in Hollywood is difficult, because even if you're successful, there are times when you have, a long time where you don't have work, and you're struggling for work and work falls through. It happens to everybody. But I was having particularly a couple bad years. So I started pursuing the novel writing on the side, and it exploded. So
Cool.
that became my day job. And now I write movies on the side rather than novels on the side, because my novels, I'm lucky if I get a movie out every 5 years or something.
Yeah.
And so, but my novels come out every year, sometimes 2 a year, and I get then thousands of people read them. So as a storyteller, it became a very satisfying, fulfilling ability to tell the stories that I want to tell, that communicate the truth that I want the world to know about. And that became the series Chronicles of the Nephilim. And then I went through the Bible and ended with Jesus triumphant. So it starts with Noah primeval, Enoch primordial. I have Abraham, David, Joshua, Caleb, and then I have Jesus triumphant, the last one. But I realized at that point that's not the end of it, because there's the whole thing of the book of Revelation, and there are many different interpretations of the book of Revelation. But from my particular interpretation, I realized, you know what, I'm not done, because I can do Revelation. That's another supernatural story, right? It's got a lot of supernatural in it that matches all this, spiritual warfare and all that stuff, right? That I write about in all my books. So what I did in the novels was I told stories where mostly giants were in the story. So we all know Goliath, right? Okay, so I tell that story. But what we don't know, or what many Christians don't know, is there's 5 other giants that were hunting David. And it says so in the Bible, right? It's just that we kind of read that as an anomaly, but we don't realize, I studied it and found out this may have been actually a sort of a like a hit squad, like a what do they call it? Assassins who are part of a guild or something like that, right?
Okay.
And they're devoted to killing the Messiah, the Messiah king, which was David, right? So I tell that story in my David story, something you've never seen. We all read David novels. Cool. Oh, we're tired of David and Goliath, right? So I tell the story about the 5 giants who were hunting David, and how David's mighty men kill them, and David himself, and how that operates. So
that's awesome.
So I needed to tell Revelation. So I told 4 novels called Chronicles of the Apocalypse. And technically it comes right after Chronicles of the Nephilim. Okay. Then I realized there's stories that I missed that I should have told, like Moses. There's no real explicit references to giants or watchers in Moses. But there is the notion of God saying, I'm going to war against the gods of Egypt. Aha. Those are the watchers, basically. So I'm thinking, okay, I got to go back. And so Chronicles of the Watchers is sort of books that fill in the gaps in between Chronicles of the Nephilim. That's and so I'm currently in process, just released my latest one this last year, Moses Against the Gods of Egypt. And I'm already working on my next one, which is going to be on the intertestamental book, Maccabees. Oh, man. So, and I'm not doing those chronologically necessarily. I'm bouncing back and forth in time.
And then you have Revelation to tackle at some point too, which I'm sure.
That's what I did with Chronicles of the Apocalypse.
Oh, okay, that's Chronicles of the Apocalypse. Okay.
Yeah. So what I do is, end time stories. They're all kind of the same these days. They're all basically knockoffs of Left Behind or some. Some similar version. I know everybody's got different. Oh no, I believe differently. Yeah, but they're all kind of the same thing. And I decided to tell the story of when John was writing the book of Revelation, and what was going on at that time. Nero persecuting the Christians, and how the context of that fit into their first century and how the ancient Christians might have understood all that going on at the time. So it's a unique take on it. In fact, it's so unique that I knew Christians would be going, what, is he making this up? So I footnoted the novel, and on each novel I have as much footnote text or endnote text as there is text of the story.
Nice.
For
Good
those, it's just for those who want to know more and learn more. You don't have to, you can just read the novel and enjoy it. Yeah. But if you want to know more, I don't just cite scholars. I actually quote whole sections from their texts on where I got my ideas from. Not the least of which is I'm telling the story in the first century. This is my Chronicles of the Apocalypse, of the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in AD 70. So I draw a lot of my historical information from Josephus, who is a famous Jewish historian of that time, the only one that we have any surviving information on that event.
Right.
And I'm telling that story, and I draw a lot from Josephus. So I'm kind of proud of the history. I draw a lot from history, and as well as from traditions and legends and stuff like that to make it more interesting and imaginative. But I root it all in, I'm not very original. In other words, I try to root it all in ancient ideas and concepts and stuff.
Do you ever get,
that's the long story.
That was awesome. Do you ever get emails from people with all those footnotes and like?
I was gonna say that's a great way to like cut down on the emails, is just to include the footnotes.
Yeah, but do you still get like argumentative emails saying why this is,
sometimes
not here and.
Yeah, not very many, to be honest. Good. I think people don't want to bother. Oh, you know what? So here's, from my experience, here's what it is. I do get people asking questions and stuff, and you're right. I always tell them, well, there's footnotes on all that, so go check out the footnotes. But the problem is that Christians are often so. Look, I don't know where you guys are coming from. Okay, so it doesn't matter.
You'll be all right.
It doesn't matter.
We're conservative / libertarian, patriotic, constitutional Protestant Christians. So,
but in terms of
also
but in terms of end times, Christians can be very committed to their views. To put it nicely, right? And quite frankly, they think you're a heretic if you have a different view. And I have a different view from.
Have you been reading our comments, Brian? Because everybody's mad all the time.
You're the guy.
Yeah. Every day.
You're heretic finder, aren't you?
That's
Yep. Okay. We're apparently we're not even saved.
Yeah. I'm apostate heretic 420.
Question when in the tribulation the rapture might happen.
And I'll tell you, Brian, like for myself, like we've had great guests on who talk about Revelations. They talk about like pre-trib and all this stuff. But I'll tell you, like for myself personally, I don't care. I don't care. I could not care less. I have zero opinion.
I totally get it. And I've been there. I've definitely been there. Absolutely. I don't know how much you know about me, but I'm literally the heretic of all of those futuristic scenario. All of them think I'm the heretic. Awesome. Because see, I'm persuaded that we can go out and have a whole show on this later, but and my book series talk about this, but Revelation, I'm convinced, is not about our future. Actually, it's about the first century, and it's not about the end of the world as we know it. It's about the end of the world as they knew it, meaning the end of the old covenant world, which was everything. It was the cosmos. They literally use that language. It was the cosmos. Their covenant was the cosmos. So the ending of that covenant is described in symbolic terms. And so I'm literally heretic par excellence for those people. And I've had a few debates. Actually, some of them have had me on their show to talk about it because they know it's so different and unique. Yeah. Some of them, like Derek Gilbert's been really great to me all these years. He's had me on his show all the time. He's even had me talk about this viewpoint, which is cool. I mean, but a lot of the other ones, I would have a debate with them and they just get out of control. They're just so sad to me, how emotional, and they start ending up accusing you of, insulting you, and like, come on, you guys, let's just talk the Bible. It's okay if I disagree with you,
Yeah,
and
it's okay.
It's just sad. And honestly, it's tearing us apart because that's the Christian example of what's going on in our culture at large, which is everything is polarizing to extremes now, left and right. So, and well, who knows? We could talk about where it all began and how it all was fueled. But yeah, we've always had harsh disagreements. But if you lived back in the 70s, in my day, or the 80s, you could have hard, even the days of Ronald Reagan. And they called Ronald Reagan, by the way, they called Reagan Hitler too. But they did it a lot more subtly. You know what I'm saying? It's like now they just come out, Trump's Hitler and DeSantis is Hitler, and then they'll say he's literally Hitler.
Right.
So their extremism has become so exaggerated now that there's no ability. Even back then, you could strongly disagree. In fact, that's what they used to talk about. Reagan and his opponent, the Democrat leader of the Tip O'Neill. Tip O'Neill. They would just fight each other, but then they'd go out and have dinner and they were friends. And that doesn't exist anymore. And
I know
the Christians have picked up that same spirit of the age, quite frankly. And we're unable to have these discussions. And by the way, it's not just with end times, as you know, it's with a lot of theological components. And I come from a tradition where, where there's a lot of that because we're really heavy into doctrine. But look, it's charismatics have the same issue. Like, it's like, if you're not reformed and you don't believe in God's sovereignty, you're not saved. Oh, and then charismatics, if you don't believe you don't have tongues, okay, they won't say you're not saved. Maybe they'll say you're not spirit filled, or you don't have God's spirit, or you're apostate, or you're deluded. But it's like, this is really destroying our unity in Christ. It's really sad to see.
It is. The enemy has done a great job of preventing where two or three are gathered in my name by this kind of histrionic, hyper emotional interjection of ego into it. Like, I had a friend who had a small publishing company who is a recent Catholic convert, and he published a version of my first novel, and he had no network. He couldn't maintain a network. Good dude, ultimately, but he just, because he was so strident in his opinions, and it tanked his company. I mean, he's done. If you're a publisher, what do you have to offer in KDP if you don't have a network? And so it keeps people from getting along. And Nick and I, there are probably 6 things that I can think of right now that Nick and I, even though we're thick as thieves, we're brothers, we've always been buddies, we vehemently disagree on. We've been on other shows where people disagree with us, like, the Dancing with Ourselves 80s podcast. We love those guys.
Yeah.
And most of those guys aren't even Christian. We have Stephen Pressfield on regularly, and he's cool. He's so awesome, and he's so sweet to us. Like, you want to talk about a real gentleman, and my favorite author of all time. So like, imagine how like every day is just, don't fan out, don't fangirl out, be cool, keep it cool.
How did you get, not to insult you, but how did he
get
him?
Fair question.
Fair question.
Yeah, totally.
Why did he date you guys?
God, it's the Lord. He was releasing a Man at Arms, which is a book about a recurring character throughout his stories who's a mercenary who gets caught up in the 1st century AD with this mute girl that he has to protect from. He gets hired by the Romans basically to track down this letter from Paul, ultimately.
Really?
And it's such a cool book. And he's, again, his girlfriend is a Christian, but he's not a Christian. He's an American Jew, a secular Jew.
Stephen Pressfield.
Stephen Pressfield. Yeah. And so anyways, he has this, but this book is amazing. And it's such a Jim Caviezel movie in the making. And so this mercenary named Telamon, he gets caught up, trying to at first pursue this letter per his employers, the Roman garrison. And then he eventually gets caught up like helping these people. And then he's on the lam and he gets crucified at one point. And it's this beautiful story of redemption. And for Steve, who actually believes in reincarnation, it's like an ascendant sort of story. But dude, even like if they made that a movie now, it would rival Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ is in its efficacy. Wow. I think so, because it would appeal to a broader audience. So he was, anyway, to answer your question, he had this package where he was like, if you pay $600, it was a promo thing. You get 25 hard copies signed by him. You get some other swag too, but then you get to have a 30-minute Zoom call with him. Private Zoom call where you get to ask him anything. And we had interviewed like Gary Wayne and a couple of other people, but we weren't really an interview channel yet.
Yeah.
And we had interviewed our narrator, Adam Burrell. my artist Roxana, and so nothing major, but anyways, we just asked him like, hey, instead of like making this a private thing, would you be willing to maybe make this into an interview, on our channel? And he said yes. And then at the end of the interview, Brian, if you want to watch my like brain explode practically in its case, he, at the end of the interview, he's like, hey, could I come back sometime and talk to you guys some more? Yeah.
Can you? I don't know.
I'll check my calendar and get back to you.
Yeah.
So anyways, ever since then, he's come back on the channel several times, and now we do a quarterly thing called Fireside Chats with Uncle Steve.
Awesome.
So he's the sweetest guy in the world.
Anyways. I'm going to get this book now. So what letter is it from Paul? Is it a secret letter, or is it one that we know of?
It's First Corinthians.
Because you know what? That's very much the premise of my Apocalypse series.
Yeah.
It's Nero has heard about this subversive letter that is talking about assassinating the whatever, the king being executed and all this stuff. And he sends a guy to track it down, find the letter, find who wrote it, and kill him. And of course it's the letter of Revelation written by John. So it's
this one
very similar.
Cool.
It's very similar, but in his case, the
I'm sure much better written than mine.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Definitely better than anything I could ever put to paper. But the conceit was that like the Roman garrison had orders that like this letter could destabilize the empire. It basically could bring the empire low by getting people to believe in, this god as opposed to Rome. So it was like an existential threat on a socio-political level.
That's really cool because it's clear what the theme he's dealing with. That's really, because it's true. Christianity did do that. It subverted the empire.
They did.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's so ironic, he's not a Christian, but I think he's like kind of that Jordan Peterson thing a little bit.
I mean, well, there's a lot of red-pilled conservatives and such. So, absolutely these days, which is great. And we're, they're finding out that like we're actually more loving people. We're more kind. We're friendly, and we have a good time. It's like, oh, really? Conservatives are not like demonic people trying to, kill trans people. It's just like,
discovering there's this critical thinking that they have.
Yeah.
They know that they can disagree on things.
Yeah.
I know emotional rhetoric, but critical thinking, yes. Yeah. But sadly, like I say, even conservatives are falling into that trap.
It's true.
And we have to work it. Now, don't get me wrong, I can get emotional and have great heated exchanges of differences. I'm all for that, but just the ability to do that and say, but we're still friends, whatever. Or we're still, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to converse rather than, no, we don't even talk to people like that. It's just really sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can even, it may not be the best approach, but you can even have the approach of like, no, I don't want to have the conversation because I don't really care what you think because I believe what I believe. But hey, you want to go grab dinner and talk about Star Wars?
Yeah.
Exactly. Or tell me about your family. You got some problems going on in your family. You want to talk to somebody.
Absolutely.
Like you can still like compartmentalize.
Yes.
So you can, and especially here's like the killer of it. There are people out there who love you, who want to be friends with you, who are not asking anything from you other than your time with them and your care for them. And like, I know Christians who will cut those people off because they don't believe what they believe. It's like, dude, okay, that person like, is team blue, that person votes blue every time. That person like believes nothing that you believe on some pretty critical matters. But you know what? Like, they're not out robbing or hurting people, and they also like treat you well. So like ease down, Ripley. Ease down, Totally. I have to remind myself of that sometimes. It's easy to...
me too, for sure.
I have a question for you. When you were getting into self-publishing, and you were doing screenwriting, and you were doing self-publishing on the side, and then eventually you realized you can make a pretty good living for yourself. Self-publishing your own novel. You made that transition. I want to ask you, how did you make the transition? How did you know when you could safely make it?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, like many writers of all kinds, screenwriters or novelists, are driven by this mistaken notion that they're hoping for the big breakthrough, and obviously it's more liable. It's more like that in Hollywood because, sold $1 million script or whatever, less than novels, right? But, or books. but there's still that idea that, yeah, I'll be able to, I'm making so much I can just quit my job and just move right over. It's never like that. It's never easy. And it's not quick. Yeah, there are the occasional stories of the person who, whatever, their first book becomes $1 million, whatever, bestseller, or first movie, blah, blah, blah. But the majority of good writers in Hollywood or books, no, everything's an incremental step. Everything's just, if it does really well, and then you kind of, your next choice confirms that and goes more in that direction. And, this is doing a little bit better. So I'll invest a little more, and I'll invest a little bit more risk. And you just have to keep taking more risk. You never make any advancements until you take more risks. And so there's never a big breakthrough is my point, aside from the anomalies. And so I've never... I struggle with that at first because, and by the way, that's wrecked a lot of writers' lives. And I look at they're still under this delusion. I'm struggling. I don't have a lousy job because I didn't get trained for anything good. So I'm still hoping if I can just sell this script, this will really, and it's like, well, no, even if you did, and even if you got $1 million, which doesn't really happen much anymore anyway, unless you're an established writer, right? And that's a whole nother thing, right? But it's like, if it was $1 million, it's really not $1 million because number one, it would be half of that anyway because of taxes. Number two, you get it in increments. You get a little bit when you start, you get a little bit with each draft, and you have to do, depending on the contract, sometimes 3 or 4 drafts in the contracts. You're not getting all the money and only in increments, and they usually stop. And then you get a final amount of money if the movie gets to principal photography, which most movies never do. And then a lot of times they stop before the last rewrite, because they're waiting until the end, till they know the movie's going to get made, and then they get a director, and then they'll use that that draft you owe them for one more pass with the director. But even then, it gets rewritten by other people, etc. But my point is like if you tally that money out, it's like no, I mean, yeah, what it ends up being is you don't make all that money that you said you made on it, and maybe for a couple years of income, if you're lucky. Yeah. But even then, mine had I've been writing in the independent, that would be studio movies, right? But I mean, I've been in the independent world my whole life, my whole career, so it was never big money ever.
Right.
So even if I got the full price of a script, it's like, oh, okay, well that's almost a year's income, so it helps, Yeah. So it's getting away from this delusionary of big breakthroughs, and just accepting the little increments and the risks, and having the long game in mind. Meaning, if you're writing for anything other than you have to tell the world your stories because the world needs it, I don't know how people can make it without that, because I've gone through stretches where I wasn't making much, and particularly when I started out, and as well with screenwriting. But I just kept writing, not because I'm going to make the big breakthrough one day. I wanted to be a working writer that just made regular income. I didn't need to be a blockbuster, but my goal was I just have these stories that I have to get out to the world. And that's why when my novel started selling, that's fulfilled that need of my stories getting out to the world that movies don't. I still love making movies, and I still do write movies, but there's so far few in between that it's like, hey, now I take a break from my novel to write a movie in a month, and then I get back to my novel.
So writing scripts for movies was your first passion, and then you sort of dovetailed into writing novels. And it's funny how the Lord works like that, right?
Yeah, and by the way, that's it's an important thing. So if you know the Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, fame, so he has
awesome
he has a fantastic 5-minute Prager University video called "Follow Your Opportunities" or "Follow Your Dreams" or something like that, and he addresses that issue of so many people's lives are, and this is big for Hollywood. I had a point in my life where I was following. My dream was I wanted to write Hollywood movies with a Christian worldview, not Christian movies, but just sort of like Braveheart, well, Chariots of Fire was my original inspiration to, which is pretty explicit. But the truth is I would, Braveheart is now my favorite movie of all time on all levels, including the spiritual messaging.
We got the Claymore right over here, actually.
So do I. I can show it to you. It's hanging on my wall, baby.
Can we both just hang out with our Claymores for 10 minutes? This isn't weird, is it? Is this?
Well, Cam Harless, my artist, He has a Lord of the Rings sword, so we did show each other our swords.
Nice.
Nice.
Not in a gay
Which
way.
one was it?
Yeah.
Right. Not gay. No
Mine's
homo.
the Claymore. I don't know which one he has. I think his was Aragorn's. That's what he
Aragorn's.
said.
Yeah.
Aragorn's.
Yeah.
I had Glam Drink. I'll tell you the cool one.
It's called Narsel.
Narsel. Yeah. The
Narsel.
cool one to have was the
You nerds.
I know. I'm sorry.
freaking nerd. Well, the cool one to have was the elf sword. The one that was
'cause
like
it was
an
so
S.
curved. Yeah.
And it's almost impossible to use, but it's
Yeah.
really cool.
You'll hurt yourself, you know.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's anyways. Yeah. Go ahead.
So anyway,
Sorry.
Mike Rowe does this video and he talks about what I actually went through and learned myself, but it confirmed it so powerfully, which is, so many people, he starts with, every year at the Oscars, someone gets up with an Oscar and says, this just proves follow your dreams. And it's like, no, because the Boulevard of Broken Dreams is all those people who did that. And yeah, there's a few who hit the top, but there's only a few. And so the truth is that you need to follow your opportunities, because if you follow your dreams, then I want to make movies, Hollywood movies with, not necessarily blockbusters, but because I wanted to do meaningful films, but I wanted Hollywood movies with that Christian worldview. And I didn't want to do Christian movies. I don't like Christian movies. I never have. And only in recent years, I love Jesus Revolution. So there are some that are coming out and they're really good.
Yeah.
But over the years, I had some, some tough years there, and it's like, I'm sticking, staying focused, and there's wisdom in staying focused too, but not when it's like, if you're clearly not doing well and you have an opportunity and you're good at something else that comes your way, it's like, you've got to have some practical wisdom. And if you're, and that's what happened was, I've never wanted to be great American novelist. And I'm not a particularly, fantastic, writer in terms of grammar and all that kind of stuff. I'm a good storyteller. And I've got that Hollywood vibe, to tell a story and to tell it efficiently. So I think that's my strength, but I'm not not one of the best writers out there. But what's important is you can tell a good story. So when the opportunity came along to do the books and they were doing better and better, I'm like, I'd be a fool if I don't massage this to pursue it more seriously. And that's what I did. And thank God I did too, because I just can't tell you like what a blessing it's been the last 8 years. It's just been my income. And what's interesting is it's not, it's still not what I wanted to do, but I've learned to love the benefits of this that I don't get out of the Hollywood stuff.
Yeah.
One of which is the stories I tell now are actually the stories I want to tell more than anything. Cool. But I also don't hold back, and I get to put all my theology into them, which I couldn't put into movies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I do in movies, but you got to be, you've just very, very subtle and all this. But in books, I've studied theology for 25 years, and sometimes, I have to, because I'm just drawn to it. And many Christians don't care for going into theology. It's just gobbledygook to them. But I'm sorry, I love it. But I do admit, it's like I didn't get much opportunity to give it back to the world. Well, now all of that's going into all my novels. So in a way, my novel stories are more an embodiment of who I am and my gifts, more than Hollywood movies are. Yeah. I still love to do movies. It's still my first passion. It really is. But I've learned to accept that this is what God has given me, and I'm embracing it. And sometimes when I get someone calling me about a possible movie project, I kind of feel a little bit like, oh no, I'm going to have to take a break from my novel to write this, which is a good feeling. But of course I do. If any producers are out there, I will do it. I'll put the novels aside. Because a month
in case anyone's listening.
A month or two of my time is not that bad anymore. But it's a mindset switch that enables you to do both. But now you have your priorities straight. And I know people who are like 40-year-olds still trying to break into Hollywood, and because that they didn't get married, and so they're single, and they're screwed. They're not screwed up, but they've got a lot of problems and issues, and they're Christians, and so it feels like they've wasted their lives because they didn't follow their opportunities of things that came their way because they wanted to stick to their dreams. And that's a big lesson.
I got a buddy, went to high school with him, who is like that, and he's a talented writer, but he won't move to Hollywood, and he stays here in Tennessee, and he just keeps thinking like, there's a difference between being focused and having tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And you can trip over a quarter trying to pick up a nickel when it comes to life and opportunities.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it is, man. You got to have that wisdom to, like, how is it? There's a line that one of my characters had from one of those books. I'm being really self-indulgent now, but it was like the wise, much like the young, are malleable. Only the foolish are rigid. And that rigidity, man, it like you'll break. You'll just your life will break in the rigidity. So
because that world, not just that world, but the world of all writing is a cold, crushing world, and it crushes your dreams, and you need to have rhino skin. We call that rhino skin in Hollywood. Also with people who just will criticize your writing. You get the worst of it in Hollywood, but it's good because it forced me to be a better writer. I really had to get tough skin and just take the harsh criticism and get back and make it better and make it better. So you do have to have rhino skin, and you have to be willing to be crushed so that you can reshape who you are and readjust your course.
That's exactly what happened to Stephen Pressfield. Stephen Pressfield was, I think he tried writing novels, and then he moved to Hollywood and had ups and downs, and spent 30 years being a screenwriter, and also continuing to write novels that no one has ever read in the meantime. And even after, like, he just released a memoir called Government Cheese, where he talks about that, where he kind of goes into detail and depth about his time in Hollywood, being a screenwriter, punching up scripts, working with a big name writer on some stuff, and just the ups and downs, even after he got his big break with the Legend of Bagger Vance.
That was his first published novel.
That was his first published novel, and then it got turned into
30 years of writing.
Wow. That's encouraging to people like me.
Exactly.
Right.
Because listen, like if you knew how old I was, man, I feel like I'm now at the prime of my writing. Like, like, especially in Hollywood, look at me. Oh, he's old. We want some young, fresh blood. And these young kids, they have no gravitas in their life. They have no meaning, they don't have any rootedness in depth. And so they just write this like, pastiche of references to other movies, and they don't know how to end a story well because they don't have meaning. They don't really have meaning. And now after all these years, I'm actually the best writer I've ever been now, and I'm fast for scripts. But Hollywood's so biased against age that they're not gonna notice that. Sad.
I got a question for you. When you published your first novel, when you first set out on that journey, you self-published. Did you use a particular printing house? Were you Amazon exclusive? Like, what did you choose and why?
Well, first I did try to get an agent because it was Bible stories and stuff. It was a Christian agent. And then I also contacted publishers on my own as well, just because you never know. I try everything, So it wasn't until I couldn't get him. And that's what's so great about it, because in the past, if you couldn't get an agent or a publisher, you just have to keep writing new books and hope that one day you will. Because self-publishing used to mean, you print your books and you put them in the back of your car and drive them if you're lucky to talk at an event or something like that.
Take them to the UFO convention.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's what it used to be, but because of Amazon, then all of a sudden the distribution opened up to the world, so to speak. Yeah. And so I just learned basically what I did, and this would be my advice to people who even email me and stuff. I just tell them, look, just go follow these guys, and I can't tell you what to do because there's a lot to do, but it's all doable. It's just there's a lot to do. I said I took a couple courses by a couple of the successful guys and said, here's how to do self-publishing from start to finish. Yeah. And they literally walk you through videos, and I had them walk me through each single step, from writing it to formatting it to uploading it to Amazon to advertising it on Amazon and Facebook, blah, 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 blah. I've taken a bunch of courses and watched them several times. And they just walk you through every step, and I just did every step that they said, and they were successful. So, I trusted them, and then I've learned a little bit on my own on things that fit for my way. But yeah, I just did it all myself. Now here's the thing though. I have an art background, so I was actually a graphic designer as a profession when I graduated.
It's built in.
So I do all my marketing ads, I do all my book covers, all my art, and I was a pro with everything, Word, InDesign, all this stuff. I was a pro with all that stuff already, so it's relatively easy for me. But I realize if you're just a normal Joe who hasn't worked with graphic stuff, there's a few things you have to do that I don't have to do. One is, which I highly recommend you find a professional cover designer who can,
Yes.
because it needs to be professional.
Yes.
and
Do not
those are-
design your own covers.
Yes,
unless
do
you're
not
Brian
design your own
Godawa.
Yes. But those are hard to get because a lot of them are booked up. So you got to get them like 6 to 8 months in advance, I think. And then secondly, obviously to also to hire a professional editor, find a good
Yes.
professional editor, to help you, not just the proofing and the spelling and the grammar, but for content, to
Yes.
help you, challenge you on your content. And those are the two big things that I really highly recommend if you want to have the professional presence that's going to make people believe your book is worthy purchasing when they've just looked at it,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then also, once they start reading you, if you're bad, they won't come back,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. We had a lot of luck with Mibel art for our cover art. Very affordable, and they've been very fast and really good. I mean, for what we're wanting out of them, like Nick did them for his Travelers League series of middle grade fiction. And
Mibel art? I'm going to put it down my
Mibel art, Miblart. And then they've been great on probably what, three of the Heavenly Realms novels I think
so.
they've done so far.
Cool.
So they've been fantastic. And then Stephen Pressfield had a friend who ran a website called storygrid.com. Storygrid is a great place for editors. It's like a house of editors where you can
community of editors, and you can, as a writer, you can go there and
so
build some relationships, find one.
Yeah.
And developmental editors, proofreaders,
content editors,
copy editors, so forth.
Yeah. So it is, man. Not having either of those, it makes you smell blind to your own stuff, and that's how you get a Star Wars prequel,
Who got a Star Wars prequel?
Like, as far as like quality of content, that's how you wind up with.
That's a stab at George Lucas.
Yeah, it's and I love George. Don't get me wrong. Like we're old school Star Wars fans, but those prequels, baby.
But there's a couple different approaches, and it all depends on what you want. Like if you just fancy, look, I just wanted to write one book for fun and put it up on Amazon and say, oh look, got my story out there, and you don't really care about, you're not building a career. That's fine. Go ahead and do everything yourself, et cetera, whatever. Do whatever you want to do. But if you want to have a career at writing, if you want to make a living, or sell books, and not just make a living, but you want to sell books, get out to a lot of people. There's a couple of other things you have to be aware of. Number one, you do have to market, because you're not a celebrity. You have to do all your own marketing. And believe it or not, even celebrities need marketing. It doesn't matter how good your book is. It can be a fantastic book, but if you don't do marketing, if you don't do advertising, which is like on Amazon and Facebook, et cetera, you're not going to sell your book. It just doesn't. I spend like 30% of my time on marketing. And then I'm trying to offload some of that to some people who can help me do it. But and then secondly is you have to write series. I mean, that was something I didn't know coming in, and I didn't necessarily like it because I have a bunch of individual ideas, but the truth is the way you grow as an author with your audience is if they like your book, they want more of the same. So if you're like, oh, I want to write this comedy, and they want to write this horror, and they want to write this romance. Yeah, if you love all that and you want to do it, but it's not going to work because people only, once they like one thing that you did, they just want more of it. And series is what sells the most. I've got lots of books out now, and my individual books don't sell as well. My series are the ones that sell everything, and that's because if they like it, then they buy all of them. And then that also spreads and increases, right? So you have to think in terms of series, and that was something new to me. So
do you see most of that? Do you see most of that in ebook format, as far as the series go, when they're buying multiple books at a time?
Okay, good question. That's another thing. So your first idea is, I'll do it on ebook because you just put it online and then they take care of it for you. Well, the cool thing about now is, and this has been around even with CreateSpace. CreateSpace is now consumed by Amazon. Amazon will do KDP. Paperback, hardbook, and ebooks. And the thing is there's no different to do a paperback. You have to format it a little differently, but you just send the digital files and they'll take care of paperback on Amazon. So So you want to do it in as many formats as you can, including hard book if you're able to, because it doesn't cost you any more money, it just costs you time. And the more formats that are available for your book, the more your book also sells, by the way, including audiobooks. That was something that I'm like, yeah, I'll do it because I thought it was cool. But I realized, oh, no, you do it because you want to put your book in so many formats, and that actually increases sales. And I remember when I first started out, and ebooks were the craze, right? It's interesting how things calm down over time.
Yeah.
I'm exclusively ebook. I don't even buy physical books anymore. In fact, someone wants to, I will send you a book. I'm like, I don't want a physical book. If you send me
the opposite of you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
And
like
I know-
a hardcore opposite. It's okay.
I know all the reasons why. Oh, I like to hold the book. I like to smell, blah, blah, blah. But also
some
when you
of
get
them.
older.
No,
there's a-
interview's over. Click. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Did it work?
It didn't work.
We got
Hold
a Stream Deck.
You're fired.
on. Okay,
There,
there,
it is.
All right.
Yeah. Did you hear it? Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Dude, the Stream Deck, so much fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
So I know all the reasons because I had them myself. I'm a very bookish guy, and I love the physicality, et cetera, et cetera. But oh man, number one, 8, 9 bookcases, it's a burden. I mean, every time we move, it's the biggest burden of
I
life.
bet it is.
Fair.
And I
fair
literally
point,
got
Brian.
rid of all my books. And the ones that I couldn't get digital, I scanned. I took like 3 weeks, and I
Wow.
scanned them with a special book scanner now. And so I got rid of literally all of them. And lo and behold, that was the best thing I did, because when we moved, we up and moved like that from California. It was like the riots were happening, the George Floyd
Oh,
riots,
really?
and the 2020 election was coming up, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be bad here because things are getting really bad, and everything was getting bad, and we're like, and Hollywood changed and went, it got to the point where they were explicitly saying, how woke they were, and they're like not going to hire white guys anymore for writers and stuff like this, and old people. So I'm like, okay, there's no more. I got to get out of here. And
Good for you.
we up and left. We sold our condo and moved to Texas, and it's a good thing because what we did was we gave away everything except that could fit in our 2 cars, and we just drove to Texas like the Beverly Hillbillies.
Wow.
And
Wow.
Awesome.
That's hardcore, man.
yeah, and that was good because I couldn't have done that with the books, right?
That's
so
pretty metal,
Yeah.
Brian. Yeah.
one car would have taken all the books, and that would have been too big anyway. So,
Yeah.
and it was good timing because I recently just finished scanning them. So anyway, there's that. There's also, as a writer, I do a lot of research, and there's nothing better in this world than search mechanism. And the fact that you can search for any word and find it has saved me thousands of hours of where was I on the page, or which page was that, or what does this guy say about something? I got to kind of breeze through the whole book to find, you just search for the word, and he doesn't say anything about it at all. Okay, good. Whatever. There's all those little things. But anyway, mostly I did it as a writer, and I also kind of felt like this is the future. I just got to get used to it. But here's the other thing: when you get older, it's harder to read the pages. I know why old people, like the big print, because also you gotta be also, even with glasses, like you gotta be under a bright light because it's just not clear enough unless you got a bright light. It makes it so uncomfortable. You can't just read anywhere. Well, heck, with an iPad, you get as bright as you want, as sharp, as large font as you want. You can read it anywhere. So that was a big sales points for me. But
During COVID, it seemed like there was a big saturation of self-published authors because everyone was kind of quarantined. Did you see that impact your marketing, your sales at all? Or what was that like for you?
I just continue to sell better over every year. Every year I've just sold
Good
for
for
the
you.
for the last 10 years, I've sold better every year. I'm writing more books, but the point is, I've made more money every year. And that year was actually under Donald Trump, and when he was president, I made my best, income at the time.
Didn't we all?
Yeah. Because people were more business oriented and they had more money to spend for
It's more money to spend.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing though, but after all these years now, and there's been differences, changes over it, but right now, because I do all my books in all those formats, I literally make the same amount of money. At first it was like dominant. I made a ton of money in Kindle, right? Because more people would buy because it's cheaper, right? But there's still paperbacks. People love paperbacks, and now I make as much in paperbacks as I make in Kindle,
Good
as
for
I
you.
make
Nice.
as I make in audiobooks. And it's just like, it's amazing. It's literally almost a third. So I recommend to anybody, do them all. And it may not start out that way, but eventually in the long run, you'll probably be making as much on each of those income wise.
Yeah. We found we do the same thing with ours. And actually, Nick has me beat. You have some of yours in hardcover, don't you?
I have one in hardcover.
One, yeah,
just one.
And one thing that we found too is when we started using Adam Burrell to narrate our books, he does such a good job at narrating them that he actually kind of informed the characters with his various accents. And even like I was thinking about it earlier today, I remember he was editing one of my books and he caught a discrepancy where there's like this fallen angel who like is kind of like a sorcerer type, like he delves in these weird things, and I accidentally had him I didn't even know I was doing this in two places at the same time. I was like, oh,
quantum.
Whoops. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, he was the quantum fallen. Yeah. And so like I was like, okay, I'll kind of like massage it a little bit in the paperback version, which is what we were editing for. But I told him, like, when it comes to time to do the audiobook version, run with it, and like there'll be a slightly different version in audiobook than what you would get in the paperback. They don't conflict with each other, but you're getting like just a little bit of just like an Easter egg in the audiobook.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so just like exploring all of those different formats opens you up to the potential for a more collaborative effort where the sum is greater than the total of its parts.
That is one other area, is the recording of the audiobooks. If you don't have a good reading voice, and if you don't know, then you probably don't have it done professionally for sure. But even I read my own novels, and I did it to save money at first, but it turns out I'm good enough that people like me, and I'm like, I'm not against having a professional reader read it. In fact, I think this new novel of mine, I do have a lot more accents that need to be there, because it's a modern novel and it's in a university, and I've got all kind. I'm kind of worried that I don't know if I can do the accents as well, but we'll see what happens. But in terms of creating characters, and the other thing is I know what I'm saying the most, the text, so that I know how to say it. As long as you have the ability to be a public speaker, or and I do have that ability. So, but otherwise, hire someone to do it. But even then, I have it recorded at a professional studio, because it's so much technical work. I don't want to be I need to be concentrating on reading, because you're stopping a lot and redoing things. I don't want to deal with the technical. I'll only deal with the creative, and he'll deal with the technical. So I pay for a professional studio to do that.
That's a solid move. Yeah. And we were surprised with Adam. First of all, like, our narrator sounds like Alan Rickman, so you kind of can't go wrong, like, right out of the gate.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. And then but then he does these accents, and he gave one of my characters a Scottish accent, and because the character now in my head, because how he read it is just like what you're talking about, it's different than how I would read it if I were narrating my own work. But his version, in a weird way, is different and maybe better. And then, like, because he gave this one guy a Scottish accent, it informed how I wrote his dialogue, because a Scottish accent, not all words sound, you can write it one way. You're like, that sounds awful with a Scottish accent,
Yeah, that's the example of a good creative collaboration. Yeah. That's not always the case, of course, but if you can find someone like that, that's fantastic. And that's why movies can be so good, because you really do get so many voices, and they catch things and perspectives that you don't, and the director is there to be able to manipulate all of them into his singular vision. That's the skill of a director, and that's the advantage of it. Of course, the disadvantage is, when you get too many people, or basically when the money people, the financial people who start impinging and marketing impinging on the creative, that becomes very destructive at times.
You got to have a 4-quadrant picture. You got to have all 4 quadrants, maybe even a 5th quadrant that they've come up with in the last 5 years. You have to have a dog. There has to be a love interest, so the hero doesn't, he's got a case of the not gays. And then what's the other one? There are so many things that, like, I've learned from listening to South Park commentaries. It never stops. And don't kick the dog. That's a big one.
And by the way, some of that is just that's what audiences. Some of it is right. Some audiences.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be a successful author, you have to listen to the audience. You don't always have to follow them, but you have to listen to them and let it affect you.
Yeah.
So one example of that is since this podcast has now turned into we're not talking about horror. We'll talk about that in the next podcast, but this one is obviously about self-publishing and stuff. But so my novels, when I first started, I'm coming from Hollywood. I'm like, I don't care if Christians don't like I'm going to write the novels I believe in, and pray. And I just believe that the uniqueness of the character, of my writing will transcend the problems they may have with it, a la sex and violence stuff, because the Bible is full of sex and violence, but Christians don't really face that fact, right? And I'm like, well, if they don't like it, then that's fine, and I don't care. And so I wrote my novels, Chronicles and Nephilim, and they were pretty, they were somewhat explicit. But look, they were no more explicit than Ezekiel 16 or Ezekiel 23, or some of these passages, okay? But they were even, I wrote like a Hollywood R-rated movie, right? And so over time, though, I've changed my views on that out of sensitivity to the audience, in the sense of, okay, look, I went back there and I go, I'm not going to, I realized there was enough responses to it that I had to make, I made a young adult version, so that, because there are a lot of people like, oh, I want to give these Bible stories to my kids, my teens, but like, if it's R-rated, I can't, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I cut it down where I didn't change anything. All the events are still there. I just don't describe it as explicitly. You know what I mean? Kind of like the Bible does at times. Sometimes the Bible's explicit, but most of the time it's like he knew her or something like that, right? It doesn't describe how he knew her, or so there's a way of doing that is actually more creative, and I actually like it. So I did that, and then over time, like over a few years, I realized, you know what? Screw this. It's like, I'm going to make the young adult version the normal version and just stop publishing, because it was a pain in the butt to have two of them. Not many people bought the young adult anyway. Right. Anyway, so I just stopped publishing the YA, and I made the normal. Now it's like the 5th edition of all the novels is the young adult version, which again, there's nothing new. It's just, I took out the explicitness. That's all. So I actually like it better now. So go figure.
Yeah.
So my point is, it's not a moral reason why I pull back. It's a creative decision that I appreciate the creativity of it, and that is also aware, not a slave, but aware to the audience. And I'm reminded of, like, look, when the Hays Code in Hollywood came out in the 40s, right? Before, if you've seen any movies before then, it's like they were pretty raunchy. And the Hays Code came out, and it forced them to be more creative. So that's when you got Casablanca, you got all these movies where they had innuendo and subtext became very strong, and that's better storytelling. Yeah. So that's why the golden age of Hollywood is to some degree affected by that Hays Code reality.
Sure.
So
because it forced more creativity. It's better storytelling.
Exactly.
Yep. So So what do you guys think of it so far?
Yeah, not bad, right?
Yeah, if you're liking this, let us know what you think in the chat. Tell us what you're getting out of this interview. Really glad you're still here. We've got more to come. So what you've heard, you're going to hear just that much. You're going to hear all new content here in just a couple seconds. We're going to play the other half of the interview. But before we do that, real quick, we wanted to mention how you can support the channel and help us grow and get more guests and bring you more great interviews like this. Head on over to patreon.com/the Gosslings, or you can scan the code.
Yeah, scan the QR code. It's a cool little feature. The Patreon is this awesome thing. We are building an amazing community of super cool, friendly, fun people who are all kind of into the same sorts of things. And it's really fun because, like, no one agrees on everything, but, like, no one ever fights about anything.
Yeah, no one ever fights about it.
Not even the rapture.
Oddly enough. So if you love talking about the rapture but not fighting about it, head on over to patreon.com/the Gosslings.
It's a lot of fun, though. We have multiple tiers for you, so if you just want to know what our guest list is for the Gosslings, as far as interviews go for the foreseeable future, then we have that tier. But if you want to, say, have your product sponsored, if you want to have us mention your product. If you want, a free t-shirt, if you want free swag, if you want discounts on merchandise, if you want access to behind the scenes content, if you want digital downloads.
And if you are really enjoying this particular episode, there is
Mhm.
some exclusive content that we did just with this guest, just for our Patreon members, and you'd be able to hear that too. And typically that's the stuff we're not allowed to say on YouTube.
So if you find this interview, maybe a little too YouTube friendly or prosaic, you're like, man, I wish they'd talk about that naughty stuff. Guess what? We probably have.
You get down and dirty over at Patreon.
We do, yeah. And Patreon members usually get access to that stuff before everybody else does, because it's unedited,
like a week in advance.
Yeah, and it's usually a good chunk of the interview. It's very rare.
Usually, sometimes the whole thing, everything,
oh my gosh,
exclusive content and everything.
Yeah,
a week in advance. You can sign up at patreon.com.
And a lot of times it ends up being like half an hour's worth of material.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's worth it. Go to Patreon, go to patreon.com/the Gosslings, scan the QR code, check it out. Ask some people in the chat,
Yeah.
Like, dude, they're almost always in here talking. They're super
we got
cool.
some patrons watching right now.
Yeah.
Ask them what they think.
Yeah.
Ask them what they get out of it.
Yeah. And if they tell you that it sucks, come let us know.
Just kidding. I'm going to mail them something.
That's right. You're getting an exclusive gift.
Shelby,
where's Shelby?
Yeah, where's Shelby? Hey, tell us about your book real quick.
Oh, yeah. So this channel actually got started because Nick and I are a couple of writers.
Yeah.
We're a couple of Christian authors. We write fiction. I wrote the Heavenly Realms series, which you're seeing the QR code for the first book in the series up on your screen right now. It's called Empyrean Falling, and it is about angelic warfare. It is basically, I think, Nick, you described it best as it's like 300 meets the Book of Revelation.
Yeah, Gettysburg, 300, and the Book of Revelation all in one
blended
story
together into one meat pie.
It is epic. It is literally the definition of the word epic. It reads like that. The story's built out like that.
And it's a lot of fun. And there's a 7-novel series. It's available, just like all these that we're about to tell you. They're all available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. And some of Nick's that we're going to talk about, I think, maybe available in hardcover.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. No. I'll tell you about mine. So, Henry Half Moon. This is the book that I like to mention. It's about a young NYU student.
Yeah.
Who doesn't believe in God, but he's called by gods he doesn't even believe in to cross over into the other dimension and battle a new invasion of a new kind of species of demon called the Algalim.
Yeah.
That are trying to restore the Anunnaki and bring about the
so if you're
beast.
into like all the cool, weird, esoteric stuff that we talk about,
stuff, yeah.
If you're like, dude, I love Gary Wayne, I love Derek Gilbert, like I love Ryan Pitterson, I love all these cool people that like talk about all this weird stuff. You're gonna like Henry Half Moon.
Yeah, and ultimately it's a faith journey, even though it weaves in Greek mythology, the occult, ancient Sumerian. It's mixing all of those things in together. But Henry actually goes through a faith journey, and if you're a believer in Christ, I think you're really gonna like how it ends.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So, well, that's all we got. I hope you guys enjoy those books. If you get one, let us know.
Yeah,
and we're gonna get back to the interview here, and we'll catch up with you guys on the back end of the interview.
Enjoy.
See you soon.
Yep. So you have an interesting take on horror. A lot of Christians are, kind of told to stay away from horror for moral reasons. But talk about your apologetic of horror and your take on that.
Yeah. Okay. So, look, we could cut this into 2 shows if you want. Make it an extra.
If you got the time for it. I mean, we
can
all the time in the world. So
yeah, I can if you want.
We'd love to. Yeah. If you're down for it. I mean, we have so many other questions we could ask. We'll do whatever you want, Brian. But yeah,
we have about 45 minutes.
Okay.
Is that enough time?
Oh, totally. So how long do you usually cut your shows to?
They range 1.5 to 2.5 hours.
Somewhere. Oh, okay. So whatever. However you want to do it, I've got the time, so that's fine.
Nice.
Okay, so it's horror. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I was first trying to break into Hollywood, I was also, as a Christian, I was studying all the story gurus of Hollywood. And of course, when I started, there weren't as many as there are now. I read all of them at the time. Sid Field was about the only one. And then John Truby came along, and now there's 100 of them. But I followed their paradigm for storytelling, and I realized how much it reflected a kind of the worldview of redemption. You know, by that, what I mean is, as a Christian, I learned to understand my personal testimony, my story, in terms of creation, fall, redemption, and then ultimately restoration. But at least the 3-act structure of creation, fall, redemption. You know, you tell your story about how you were before Christ and how you found Christ, and then what is your life after Christ. You know, that kind of a thing. And I realized how much that was similar to the storytelling, what the storytelling gurus were saying, which was the story arc of the hero. And I realized that it's about redemption is what it's about. And so I started developing my own Christian aesthetic, which is my own philosophy of beauty, particularly related to storytelling. And in the course of that, I decided to put all my ideas together, and I wrote Hollywood Worldviews, which was my first published book from InterVarsity. You can still get it. I've had one revision of it. It's a classic now. And Hollywood Worldviews was sort of helping Christians and religious people to appreciate, and it's like storytelling 101, help you watch a movie better or a series better. Because if you understand, just like if you learn a little bit about what art is, you don't have to study art, but just take an art appreciation class. You can appreciate paintings more. You know, you go to the museum, you can appreciate more, right? Well, it's the same thing. If you know a little bit about storytelling, what goes on, you don't have to become a storyteller. I thought it could help them learn to appreciate and discern, because there's so much reaction in the church. Two extremes was the cultural glutton who just consumes it all. I'm free in Christ, or just, you know, whatever. They're just worldly Christian. They just watch everything, and that's just entertainment, right? And then the other extreme, which was more the fundamentalist, which I also had a past, kind of a past in, not a lot, but a little bit of a past with they just throw the baby out with the bathwater, cultural anorexics. It's like, oh, there's sex and violence in there, so it's wrong. It's like, well, there's sex and violence in the Bible, so there's something wrong here with your understanding.
Yeah, but that's different. That's holy. That's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. That's true stories or whatever. Yeah. They have all the excuses. And so I decided to write my book to help them. And the most popular chapter was the chapter on sex and violence, because I actually went through the scriptures. I made biblical arguments because I'm an evangelical Christian. So I got to have biblical arguments for all my, you know, my moral arguments or my arguments about meaning and such. You know, I have a scriptural foundation for everything. So I addressed the sex and violence issue, and in a way that was really unique at the time, and no one had really done that. And it was about tearing down the bad foundations so you can build a new foundation. I wasn't able to give them, well, okay, so how do I create standards for my teen, and what do I let them watch, and how do I interact? I didn't go that far. I was just saying, look, I'm addressing these extremes where it's just like, all of it's bad. And you have to realize that there has to be some sex and violence technically in the story, because that's the sin, so to speak. Not all violence is sin, right? There's righteous violence, and righteous sex is marriage. But understanding the principle of, I said, well, look, the Bible's full of sex and violence. And I gave all these, I talked about the Song of Solomon is actually, the English translation is not accurate. It's much more explicit than in Hebrew than it is in English. So it's very sexual, right? And I pinpointed all the grotesque stuff that's in the Bible and said, look, if you read this and you accept it as part of God's paradigm for pointing us towards truth and holiness, well, that's what's in movies too. Not all movies, and there's a difference between righteous and unrighteous. So it's like, but just to see that a movie starts out and a man's committing adultery, that's not good. No, you have to realize, if you understand storytelling, you know, in the beginning, that's probably his flaw. He's a selfish being, and that's why he's doing that. But he's going to learn through the story not to, you know?
Yeah.
And many Hollywood movies still follow. Now, not all of them do. I admit that. Some of them glory in it, right? And I tried to make those nuanced distinctions. But that became one of the most popular chapters. And I realized that I've loved horror all the time. And to me, it was a natural step over, you know, was, well, same thing. I mean, look, the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, they're literal horror epics. Yeah. And so and to me, horror was I understood it intuitively, that it's not about blood and gore. It really is about morality, actually. And so, again, not all horror films are. Some of them are exploitative. And I tried to define what's exploitation, what's correct. Anyway, then I got inspired to go, you know, horror is another one of those genres that Christians have a hard time with. And the more fundamentalist you are, the more you do. And so I thought, I wanted to, write an apologetic for horror as a genre. Not all horror films are acceptable, but as a genre, it's legitimate. And I make my arguments from the Bible, so I proved it from the Bible that God himself loves the horror genre. And that's not just like those visions and dreams and revelation. Those aren't literal. So those are like a movie, right?
Yeah.
So I contacted my favorite Christian apologist journal, Christian Research Journal, and I knew people there, and I pitched them, let me write an article apologetic for horror. So I did that. And it was real popular on the article, and still to this day very, very popular. But that's where I kind of laid out the foundation. I drew out several elements. Let's see. I think I made three main points. One was the power of horror. The purpose of horror allows us to show original sin, the doctrine of original sin. And what that means is that modern man believes we're not evil, we're not sinful, we're basically good, right? But horror, when you watch horror film, no, there's evil and good, and it's distinctly, and it's clear, right? Now, obviously not all movies define evil biblically, but the concept of that, and horror allows you to have that, to explore that suppressed reality. Apostle Paul said that sinners suppress the truth in unrighteousness. And so you've got Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Victorian horror stories are among the best because they really are rooted in a Christian worldview. And a lot of Frankenstein, even though Mary Shelley was not Christian, but she was struggling with that libertinism that she got into, right? And so, Frankenstein, Dracula, these are all metaphors for the evil nature or sinful nature and how we suppress it and how it comes out, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? So it's a creative way of describing original sin, which is one of the primary Christian doctrines, right? We're sinful, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Creation, fall, redemption. And another way that horror can do that is that horror is a way of, let's see, what did I write here? I know my third element. My second element was, horror helps show the consequences of sin, right? And of course, normal movies do that too. But in particular, horror really does focus on that. For example, the classical paradigm for most slasher flicks was the teens that had sex died. Yeah. And the virgin lives, right? Now
it was, yeah.
A lot of that
supernatural punishment.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the moral driver of the genre. Whether people agreed with it or not, it was. And of course, Scream came and changed that, and they've deliberately changed it, But I still think, though, that the essence of horror still is the same like that. Maybe there's a little bit more immorality that's allowed in there, but it's still, the idea is your sins will find you out. And there's so many movies that have that literally as a theme, In fact, a lot of these movies, that's what it is. It's like the manifestation of the monster is your sins that are haunting you, literally sometimes, right? Yeah. So there's that element, that component where horror allows us to see that consequences of evil, which is the same thing that the Bible does. If you go down this path, look at all the Proverbs, right? And then lastly, I talked about how it's a social commentary. Horror becomes a way that you describe the suppressed evils in our society and show where they'll lead to. My favorite example is the zombie movies, like I love 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later. And a lot of zombie movies are what makes us human. The Walking Dead, what makes us human? Is it the evolutionary ethic of survival of the fittest? Or is it the Christian ethic of self-sacrifice that is what we should live by? That's one of the reasons why, to me, zombie movies are the best, because that's almost all zombie movies struggle with the evolutionary ethic versus the Christian ethic. And of course, the Christian ethic is the ethic that wins, even though the heroes and people sacrifice themselves. That's what makes them more human. So that's one example of the social commentary. 28 Days Later is the same thing. It deals with the same theme, but it also sort of shows how what humanity becomes. There's a group of people, soldiers who are protecting people, but they have become as inhuman as the zombies. And that's part of the moral point of it all, right?
Who's the real monster? It's
Yeah,
that
and
kind of thing,
that can be a cliche, but it's a very powerful. I love that theme, right?
Yeah.
So these are just some of the ways, but it's not just that. I'm not just justifying it, like, oh, here's my explanation. Like I gave tons of Bible scriptures. Like there's God has one of my favorites is I think it's Micah 3, I think it is. Let's see if I wrote that one down. Sorry, I should have these scriptures at my fingertips. Anyway, it's one of these prophecies where I think it's Micah, and he's talking about how the lead. Where are you guys? I lost you now. Here. Oh, there you are. So he's talking about how the leaders of Israel have. They've ruined my people. They're spiritual adulterers. Adultery is used a lot to be a spiritual metaphor of the relationship of Israel with God, but also cannibalism. It talks about how your leaders, you are cutting my people up, cooking them in pots and eating their flesh. Wow. That's zombies, folks. Yeah. And God's using zombies literally to describe the seriousness of the loss of relationship with Him. And of course, like we already mentioned, we've got hybrid Godzillas in Revelation and Daniel, all over the place, and monsters and werewolves and stuff in these prophetic paradigms. The point is, and full of blood and violence and gore. Mm-hmm. And it's not just literal, they are metaphors. Like the seven-headed dragon is not literal, but it's a seven-headed hydra, right? So and it's a demonic beast too, Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's this is sort of like, this is the realization that, you're reading the Bible, it's full of horror. God uses horror and He loves horror. So you have to at least accept it as a legitimate genre. That doesn't mean you as a Christian have to like the horror movie genre or anything like that, or horror novels. And it doesn't justify all horror, because there's a lot of bad exploitation, which does exploit sexuality or immorality or whatever. So there's a fine distinction there, and you have to make that, right? But it does give you at least the proper foundation for understanding that it's not just an acceptable genre. It's actually one of the most powerful genres of storytelling for communicating morals, because it's very hard-hitting to the gut. Yeah. And it's very strong on moral black and white, on what is right and what is wrong, and what is evil and what is good. And and the deservingness of evil, of punishment and judgment on evil, that's in most all horror. And I'm speaking mostly the mainstream stuff, because I know that, like, when you go down into the dark hallways of some of the genres, it just is just so grotesque that it's just not even worth it, But
give our audience an example, maybe a movie in the past 30 years that they'd recognize that kind of fits this description.
Oh, I've got a ton of them, but I was not as prepared. Give me a second. I'll find.
I was thinking of like M. Night Shyamalan.
Top 3 favorites.
Hold on. I'm getting old, guys.
I figured M. Night Shyamalan kind of steered into
absolutely.
That
of course.
I've got lists. Signs. I mean, Signs is literally about a man's redemption.
Good.
Yes,
from a demonic invasion, and like M. Night Shyamalan even said in an interview in 2008, like, no, they're not aliens, they are demons.
Yeah,
He came out and said it. So, anyways,
totally. So let me give you some examples. One of the latest ones is, and I think it's still on free on Netflix, Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Okay, awesome movie.
So this is a slasher movie with the college teens get caught in the woods with the Hicks who are hunting them down. But the truth is, it's the opposite. The Hicks are actually nice guys, and it's the leftist liberal paranoia of the college kids who think they're being hunted down that makes them, in fear, end up stumbling and getting killed and blaming it on the Hicks, while the Hicks are the actually nice guys in the woods, right?
Trying to help them,
exactly.
It's awesome. It's such a fun movie.
In other words, it's an indictment of the progressive leftist paranoia of the right. Absolutely. And by the way, there was another one. I didn't write that down, but I should. Something very similar to that, which was surprising to me, but Blumhouse put it out, so it didn't. But it was called the Hunt. I think it's The Hunt. And what was so funny was it came out in the Trump era. And what it was so these liberals get together And it's basically the most dangerous game, which is a classic.
It's like Epstein
theme.
Island dangerous game kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's liberals hunting and killing captured conservatives because they're so evil. You know what I mean? Like these pro-Trumpers and stuff. They're so evil. But then, of course, we see the evil is just as much, or actually more, in the liberals who are hunting them. But the filmmakers even came out and said, look, we wanted to have both sides in this story. We weren't attacking anyone particular, but that rarely happens in Hollywood. It's always an attack on conservatives, right? So those are a couple of, but some of the more in line with the traditional usage of it is one that I really, The Walking Dead I already mentioned. The Walking Dead was really, I watched the entire series, and it had some dumb seasons, and it, as with all seasons, it kind of gets so redundant after a while, but you love the characters so much that you watch it, right? But even the first 3 or 4 seasons are just among the best. The essence of all the storytelling is always like I said, the ethic of sacrifice, people who sacrifice for others and protect others versus themselves. And you lose your humanity when you become a monster. And thus you have the gangs who are killing people versus the people who are trying to become a community, right? And then, of course, as time goes on, they also explore, you can become a community, but then fall into authoritarianism, which can also become oppressive, right? So there's that theme in Walking Dead. Of course, Midsommar, which was, but that's also it's very similar to the Wicker Man.
Yep.
I don't know if you ever. Now the original was really super scary, and the one with Nick Cage, it was still good. I like Nick Cage. Okay, sometimes he does some real bad movies, but sometimes he does some real good movies.
I do too.
And this one was
more
one
of
of
a
his
treasure protector.
Yeah.
Look, The Rock will always be one of the greatest movies ever made.
And have you seen Pig? Pig was really good.
Oh, I forgot about Pig.
That's a new one. Yeah, that's a new one. Oh, and his new one, the unbearable weight of massive talent, where he mocks himself. It's awesome.
Really?
Oh yeah, you got to see it. He plays himself, and his career. He needs money, so he goes. This rich guy has him come over, and they end up getting enmeshed in a actual real action dangerous world thing. And it's so funny because he mocks himself. It's great.
Dude, he is a national treasure.
The modern
he is the national treasure.
He is.
Yeah.
So anyway, Wicker Man was again, and Midsommar is very similar. It sets up this scenario of pagan religion, the nature religion, and a lot of it's female matriarchal driven, like the Wicker Man, or Midsommar, where it's just pagan, like one with the earth. It's Gaia, and it goes into that. And then, of course, innocent people get drawn into it, and they're interested, and then they get caught up in it, and it ends up being their death because they become the sacrifice to the earth gods on whatever level. And the Wicker Man was interesting because that actually was that showed a matriarchal religion on a little island who sacrifices, and they emasculate their men and make them into slaves. And then the stranger man who becomes a sacrifice to the gods because men are evil. So it shows that the very thing that feminism and matriarchalism complains about patriarchy is the same inherent evil within them. Yeah. And it just shows that they're just as evil as everybody else. So your ideology is worthless. You know what I mean?
I think we have a soundbite for it. It's Luciferian.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. It's like,
who is that?
That's me. I think I say it like every episode.
He says it every episode.
So
gotcha.
It's to the point where because if I remember correctly, Wicker Man is tangentially based off of, I think it's like the short story. I think it's called The Harvest. South Park mimicked it in an episode with Britney Spears, where like Britney Spears had to be the sacrifice, the Wicker Man sacrifice, basically. That's why they were trying to get Britney to commit suicide, and that's because great. Like we all need her as the scapegoat, as the sacrifice, so our harvest can be great, and it's the same. Yeah, it's the same exact thing, and it does. It's an indictment of godless, like not just godless but anti-god
paganism,
pagan structure,
Yeah, because it is the pagan worldview. And of course, nowadays, what do we hear? Like, oh yes, Gaia and environmentalism and with Earth and the patriarchal Christian religion rapes the earth and all this kind of stuff. Well, that is rooted in a very evil motivation. So, and an evil worldview, let's put it that way.
And meanwhile, the patriarchy is the only thing that's protecting you to allow you to have your fruity little opinion, because like Jack Nicholson said, you need me on that wall.
Yeah. Yeah, so, exactly.
I'm not going to get us in trouble. I'll shut up. I think Nick had another question about.
We
can keep going more movies, but yeah, what else? What else?
Actually, I did. Well, I had that one last question about.
I did the demonic reality.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So being in Hollywood, right? You've been exposed to that. You kind of are aware of some of the biases and so forth. Do you think there's some kind of demonic reality going on? In Hollywood, kind of controlling.
And is Mel Gibson right?
Is Mel Gibson right? Is there like a
My Lord and Savior Braveheart
reality of false gods in that are kind of controlling Hollywood from a spiritual standpoint? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I would say yes. I'm not a very charismatic guy. Like, I don't see demons behind everything and stuff. And but from a high level, I would say yeah, because there's also a pedophilic secret ring that's going on in there. And this isn't Pizzagate stuff. This is just like there's the gay guys in Hollywood, like Bryan Singer and all these guys. They've been outed by some people who have complained about it, that there's just as much sexual abuse, homosexual sexual abuse, as there was heterosexual abuse of women actresses, years ago, right? And so, in a very real sense, that as much as the Me Too movement was, a hysterical and extreme fallacy, believe all women. No, women lie, but
very poor choice of words, by the way.
Right? Yeah.
Believe all birthing persons.
Yes, that's true. Yeah,
it's a fallacy.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you did there. Okay.
Oh, that's good. It's good. But my point is I've known of people who know about those things. I haven't come into contact with it, but I do believe that there is a lot of that in the industry, because wherever you have money concentrated with power and beauty, you're going to have that, because that's what keeps things going. I as bad as I thought the Me Too thing was, I think it was a great refresher. And I'm like, in a way, you guys really agree with us Christians. We've been saying this for a long time. You shouldn't have to be forced to be nude in movies, It's like, oh, but we're the prudes. Now you're the ones And so, well, okay, at least you finally realized we were right, Yeah.
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, so that stuff is going on, and there's power, evil, and a lot of drugs going on there. There really is. And it's so sad. It's really sad and pathetic, but that's a whole oppressive spiritual oppression that has to have some kind of spiritual reality behind it, for sure.
How did you maintain your bearing, both your Christian bearing and your psychological bearing, while existing in Hollywood? Did you live in Hollywood?
Yeah, I lived in LA for 20 years, and and I had to move to LA. I had to realize and accept, it wasn't until I moved to LA that things started to expand. Now, I made my first movie when I was still in Orange County, but I realized if I need to make more connections based on that movie to start getting more interactions, I had to be in the city. And that was the recommendation from other successful people. And that was I wish I would have done it 10 years earlier, in a way. But I'm okay. My wife and I just hated the city, and we didn't want to live there, and we tried our best. And so it was who we were, and that's fine. I don't care. But I recommend people move there. But at the same time, now I don't know if I would recommend people move there, because the whole state is governed so horribly and so oppressively. Like the Gascon, the DA, he's like, he won't. They're not prosecuting criminals. And they're going to prosecute people who defend themselves against criminals, and they've been doing that. So it's like, you can't live there safely anymore. At least in LA. Now you can out in the Orange County and in North and stuff, Ventura County and stuff, but not in LA. I wouldn't recommend to move there, because it's just so horrible on every level, and not just the moral level,
Yeah.
because that's always been immoral, and drugs and all that. That wasn't the issue, but it's become more outwardly oppressive in terms of the governance of the state and the city, and also the environment within Hollywood. It's become it has become fascistic woke, where they are hunting you down now. We could, like, conservatives would get in under the radar. We just find people that will agree with us, and we work with them on projects, and we subtly get our own movies made or whatever. And
or you just stay quiet about it, like James Woods,
yeah, and most of us would be quiet. Yeah. And then there was a whole, I don't know if you heard about Friends of Abe. That was a few years of what happened about, I don't know, it must be 10 years back now. Some of the conservatives, were getting frustrated about it. Some of the, like Gary Sinise and a couple of the other higher level guys who were conservatives were so frustrated with the oppression that they started meeting together just to encourage one another. And it grew, and it became like 1,500 of us would meet secretly weekly.
You had your own bohemian
church, like the early church in Acts.
It really was. And dude,
meeting at the
graveyard. We kept it secret for years. It's so oppressive that everyone knew that you cannot let this secret out, and you got to know someone before you invite. You literally had to invite them personally to come. And it was like an AA meeting, but for conservatives in Hollywood trying to survive.
It's like Christian Skull and Bones.
Yeah, exactly. And that went on for a few years. And then what happened was during the Obama years, they found out about it and started coming out, because I think someone like Pat Boone or someone just like, he didn't realize, how secret it's supposed to be. And he starts talking about it on some interview, and so like, what's this? So Variety.
Second faux pas Pat Boone has ever made since he made that metal album.
Yes. Listen, we would have a Christmas party out in the boondocks every year, and there'd be like 1,000 of us there, and the Hollywood wouldn't know about it because we'd be so quiet. And we would have we'd have some famous conservative guys, like a comedian or something, and entertainment, and then a meal, and we all hang out and stuff.
That is a miracle, Brian.
Yes, but then once they started finding out about it, then Obama started going after us, and they were trying to demand that they give over their membership lists to the government. Yeah, I kid you not. And this is the fascism that everyone's worried about the Republicans doing, but the actual fascism is actually coming from the Democrat Party. But particularly Obama was doing this.
Was that through the IRS? Was that through the IRS?
Yeah, through the IRS.
Yeah.
And
this
Gary
was under Lois
Sinise.
Lerner. This was under Lois Lerner.
Yeah, Lois Lerner for sure. But there were, she obviously he was part of everything. He was intimately worked with all of them, and so Gary Sinise ended up dismantling it because he just, I'm not going to hand it over, and we can't keep doing this because they're going to hunt us down. And it was just so sad, but it did its purpose for the time, and it was good. And so that was going on there in Hollywood. And so I don't remember what the question was, but we had that so you'd find your people, and you try to work with them. I know where I'm getting at. And so we try to get under the radar, and and we try to prove our excellence and such. And then when people would find out, you're a Christian or you're a conservative, it's like, wow, but you're so cool. Why? I don't get it. Because they are talk about like hicks. No, really.
Right.
Hollywood people are the biggest hicks in the world because they're so parochial. They literally think like right or conservatives out there are like right wing, drooling Trump fanatics. It's like, oh, dude, you don't realize that you are the stereotype of the stereotypes that you are actually impugning on other people.
Cluelessly naive, unjustifiably arrogant, soft-handed,
uneducated, technically, in that sense, right?
Yeah. Well, the irony is they blame us. Their stereotype of us is that we're some shotgun-toting redneck trailer park trash. Yeah. But then, the one time that Biden decided to give some gun advice, he was like, you just go out there with your double-barrel shotgun and you light a round off in the air and that'll scare people away. It's like, all right, well, you just violated at least 2 major laws, buddy, especially if you're within city limits. This is the most FUD, redneck, hill trash, inbred, bucktooth, monkey-snorting DNA thing that I have ever heard.
That's a good line. Keep
Hallelujah.
That line,
Holy... Where's the Tylenol?
Totally.
Anyway, so it's just the irony is insane.
Yeah, so they're basically bigoted pigs, and I mean, bless their hearts. I'm a Texan now, so I say bless their hearts.
Yeah.
And you know, and I shared Christ with people as I could, and but some are more hidden than others because they're a little bit more fearful of their careers, and others are just like, I don't care. I'm just going to speak loudly, and God would bless them, and some would lose their careers. You know, so everyone had different levels of what you would, but we could get in under the radar to some degree and get Lionsgate to release our, you know, our little independent film. Basically, I worked in the independent realm. And so, but what happened was in these, you know, around, you know, 2019 and 20 and all that was that they just started coming out and just started saying, you know, basically, you know, the white man's days are over. You know, no more. We're not going to hire more middle-aged white men and stuff. We're looking for people of color in everything. And then the Oscars, when they made the requirement for a Oscar-nominated film, has to have a certain percentage of people of color in every level there. Okay. I haven't watched the Oscars in 10 years because they repulsed me anyway. But it's the sign of my industry, right? It was the sign of my industry. So I would at least the next day check and see what won, and you know, watch some of the movies so I can comment on them, right? But then of course, you know, and then the ones that they would pick would be weird how one year they would actually pick a good movie, but then the other ones were all political leftist movies. And I don't know how that happened. How would they get, I can't remember what the movie was, but in recent years, an actual good movie won. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, so when they made that, I realized they're just loud and proud about it now, and they're just going to say, you know, we're going to be racist and discriminatory against white people. It's like I knew, and it wasn't just about the racism of Hollywood that was really becoming explicit and strong. It was the whole leftist bigotry where that they're going to demand basically that, you know, story. They already do pressure this, but when it became explicit, you know, when they come out and say it, when they have the balls to say it, that we're going to be discriminatory, which is like, that's the anti-American, isn't it?
Because
you know,
now they're protected enough to get away with it.
They're protected. Exactly.
And the state protects them, and they still have the unmitigated gall to call themselves the resistance. It's like, really? Because Bud Light, Coke, and, you know, the NSA all back you. So what are you resisting, you know? Yeah,
it's like the Nazis saying we're resisting the Nazis, you know? Like, no, I'm sorry. So when they started saying, you know, I realized that it wasn't just that they're going to be liberal pressures to, well, let's change this character to a lesbian, you know. It's going to be, no, we have to have a trans person here, or these people all need to be black, and the story has to be pro trans, pro everything that they're for, you know, pro gay, pro everything. They were becoming more militant and fascistic about it. I knew that I couldn't sneak in under the radar anymore, because even if I did sell a script and we're starting to make it, all the money and all the people in power are going to say, well, you got to change the script and make it more woke, basically, on all these different levels. And so I just knew it's over. And that, to me, was all within these last few years that just really Hollywood is dead now. Now again, I will admit there's still some good movies that get made. And there are, because there are individuals.
Top Gun 2.
Yeah, I mean, Top Gun. Yeah, dude. Awesome. Like, best movie of the year. Yeah,
John Wick. You know, John Wick's still super based.
Exactly. So there are individual, and what was the one with Pratt? What's his name?
Chris Pratt.
Yeah,
Chris Pratt. You know,
the Terminal List.
The Terminal List. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those were, I recognized some of the actors in there as some of the conservatives that I knew.
That's awesome.
So there is still a circle of people, and there will be some good movies made, and there are some great series that still get made. But it's dead in terms of my little guy hopes. And so I'm just like, I'm getting the heck out of there. And I still do movies. It's funny, like I made more movies after I got out than the last few years before I got out. So, you know, and I'm willing to do some Christian stuff now. It's still hard, and I've turned down some Christian projects because they were so bad that I just can't do it.
Right.
But I've just done one recently, and I'm like, okay, this I can make work. If they have the guts to take my storytelling about Jesus, which would be really unique, then I'll do it. And they did, and we'll see what happens. You know, I don't know yet. And, you know, I sold a script about Ruth to Sony, and they've been working on that. But I had the Lion Man of Moab in there.
I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah. I have a giant in there. I don't know if they've cut it all out. They may have cut all the good stuff out, but
all the cool stuff.
Yeah, all the cool stuff,
Dude, I'm so glad. Like, I mean, we don't have time to talk about it, and it'd just be self-indulgent of me anyways. But listening to you talk about your struggles are exactly the kind of struggles that I encountered when I wrote the Heavenly Realms series. I mean, almost to a T. And it's like at this point, if HBO came knocking on my door wanting to like turn that into a mini series,
don't do it.
I mean, honestly, because you know what they do? They'd make all the angels gay. They make them all gay.
No, exactly, dude. I'm no exaggeration. That is literally where it's at. Don't ever do it. The only way you do it is if the producer is a high enough level where he does what he wants, like a Mel Gibson or something.
Mel, call us.
Yeah. So that's the only way that you could do it, is that if you know the producer has enough weight where he's going to get it done, he's not going to let it become. But you got to know who they are and know that they really are legit. They're not going to cave.
Speaking
and
of
it's
which,
possible.
Do you real quick, because I know Nick's got one more really good question for you, and we're creeping up on time. So, but I want to ask you just real quick about Mel Gibson. We're big fans of Mel. Me particularly, I love Mel Gibson.
So do I.
For every single thing that he has ever said or done unapologetically. Where's the
Yeah. Gotta have
I didn't hear it.
You can't hear it. It's the freedom quote from Braveheart at the
screaming freedom.
The Braveheart. Yeah. Sorry.
By the way, here's what you do for your sword. You tell someone, "I'll let you hold my Claymore sword if you can recite the Sons of Scotland speech from Braveheart." Because I can do. Yeah, I did that.
Yes.
I haven't done it in a while, but Sons of Scotland,
7 feet tall.
Yeah,
with bolts of lightning from his eyes and balls of fire from his arse. And if he were here today, it's awesome. So real quick though, I've heard rumors that Mel Gibson actually is kind of doing like the Kevin Smith thing, where the of Jesus returning, and like the second coming of the Christ. Have you heard any rumblings about him making this apocalyptic Jesus comes back with a fiery sword from his mouth kind of movie?
No, just that the resurrection movie though. He's doing the resurrection movie where Jesus goes into Hades.
Maybe that's maybe
that's what you heard. That's going to be cool because Randall Wallace wrote one of the scripts that he's using.
Wallace.
He's the guy who wrote
Braveheart.
Oh, wow.
And he's a Protestant Christian, which would be a great balance. Ah, yes.
There we go.
We're
just going to have this between us for the rest of the... Mike Fisher with Jardani Jovanovic will understand. It's fine. Brian, thank you, buddy. We'll do this again. You are amazing. Have a good weekend.
See you later.
Talk to you,
man.
Bye-bye.
Hey, if you guys have been enjoying this interview and you'd like to hear the rest of it, including some really down and dirty stuff that we're not allowed to say here on YouTube, head over to patreon.com/the Gosslings. We'd love to have your support there and share exclusive content with you.
That's right. Keep it cool. And remember, these are interviews that strike down the dark.
They do indeed strike down the darkness. They strike down all the darkness.
That's right. Strike it down hard.
So hard.
All right. Well, there it was, everybody. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us tonight. We hope that you all had a great time. And don't forget to like and share, subscribe, do all that stuff. But we're just really grateful that you were here tonight.
Yep.
So, we're happy to move along for the week.
Absolutely. And we look forward to seeing you guys here next week too. And if you wouldn't mind, just hit the like button real quick, because it really, really, really helps. It tells YouTube that because you like this video, all of the information that they have taken from you, they're going to compare that to other people's information that they stole. And they're going to say, hey, these guys might like this interview too. And so anyway, it would help us.
Yeah, it's a good way to tell YouTube that we don't suck.
Yeah, and you know what? Don't even think of it as a thumbs up. Think of it as a middle finger in the face of the beast, and let your freak flag fly, people.
It's just a thumb in the eye of the beast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just grab it by the lips and yank as hard as you can.
That's the great Weird Al said. And what else? So we love to toast out of these new mugs that we designed. You guys should get you some. Go over to our Teespring page.
get you a mug. Oh, dude, we got T-shirts. We've got like duffel bags, all that
Towels.
kind of stuff. Anyway,
yeah, hoodies. We designed, like, Nick and I spent like half a day just designing all this cool stuff.
Yeah, it
We
was
even like designed some like Patreon exclusive stuff, but we had a lot of fun, man.
Yeah.
You know, and we priced all of it, like, you know, we priced it about as low as you can.
yeah, basically at cost.
Oh my gosh.
Which is
Yeah.
Anyway, check it out. We would love for you to let the flag fly and show your
Yes.
support out there. And
Get you an aliens or just demons you can shoot shirt.
love that.
You know?
That was one of our first.
Yeah.
One of our originals.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Check that bad boy out.
Isn't that cool? It's got little
Yeah.
crosshairs.
Eat your
on the
heart out,
Gray's
Fox
face.
Mulder. You know? Whatever.
Oh man. But anyway, we have really enjoyed bringing you this interview. We hope you guys got a lot out of it, and we will be here next week.
Yep.
And hope you guys have a very blessed week.
Absolutely. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Nick.
We are the Gosslings. Go forth
And strike down the darkness.
Nice. Adios, muchachos.